Another frequent complaint I hear is that related to mixing undergraduate and master's students in the same teams. So first, professors who teach master's level students always demand that their students be placed in teams with other master's level students with more mature, more skilled, smarter, I don't know, older, more experienced other master's students. The master's students often complain that they don't want to babysit the younger undergraduate students because they, again, too, whatever the complaints are. Undergraduate students often complain that they don't want to be in teams with master's level students because they're too bossy. They think too much of themselves and they do not listen to the younger undergraduate students. And then obviously the whole There are several things here to discuss. So one is, what is a master's level student, an MBA student, or there are two things here to discuss. One is, what is a master's student versus an undergraduate student? Can we even separate them reliably once we are outside of the United States? And two, is there really a difference in performance and skill level? So first, in terms of the level separation, in the United States, or in Canada for that matter, in some other countries, indeed, we know that we have high school, then we have 4 or so years of bachelor's studies, and then we have 2, maybe sometimes 1 years of master's studies. And so students get to the master's level when they are at least 23, 24, and many have work experience, so they go and do their MBA or other master's level degree when they're more like late 20s, early 30s. That's not always the case in other countries. So we have a lot of students, for example, from India, who are labeled as master's level students, but who are like 21 years old. We see that also often from Eastern Europe. So I'm not sure how exactly the system is set up there, but it seems like just about everyone becomes a master's student at some point, automatically almost. And we see a lot of them who are literally like 21, even 20 years old. And then vice versa, we see a lot of countries where we have a lot of older undergraduate students, those who go back to school, or in some countries like in Germany, for example, we have they apparently have longer school and longer bachelor's studies level. And so by the time people get to the master's level or to the end of their undergraduate studies, they may be in their 23, 24, kind of that type of age. And so if we went purely based on how students are classified at their universities in their countries, we would end up with very different cohorts of students labeled the same, like masters, but very different ages, very different experiences. So when we form ex-culture teams, we try to abide by those classifications and try to keep separate undergraduates and masters. But sometimes it makes no sense. So if we have older, more experienced, often with managerial experience undergraduate students, it makes sense to put them on teams with other older students. And vice versa, if we have a class of so-called master's students who are like 19, 20 years old, which we do have often, it probably makes sense to match them with students who are roughly of the same age and experience. But perhaps a more important issue here is there really a difference in performance? Is there really a difference in experience, in skill, in diligence? And I'm not sure how to measure that because, the challenge here is that maybe MBA students are graded tougher, and so as a result, the peer evaluations or report quality evaluations cannot be directly comparable across levels. But for what it's worth, I tried to do it. So I have last semester's data. We had 243 executive MBA students who were on average 29 years of age. Then we had master's level students. And as you can see here, on average, they were 23.5 years. So that's the classification provided by the professors. And so on average, they were 23.5. So then we had also other 23.9, basically similar to undergraduate, but maybe, to masters, but in some countries they just don't have the classification, so they would call them post-secondary or something like that, and they're even a little older than masters. And then we have undergraduates. So on average, they're like 3 years younger, so on average 20. But then I look at, for example, peer evaluations. So here we have peer evaluations at the end of week 7, and then the post-project evaluations. It's about the same every week, but I just took these kind of for illustrative purposes. And then I also took the quality of the reports that they wrote. And most of the time, EMBAs were with EMBAs, masters with masters, undergraduates with undergraduates, and some teams were mixed. So when you look at peer evaluations, EMBAs indeed get higher peer evaluations from their team members. But that's only by a fraction. Like if you look at undergraduates, 4.2 versus 4.1, 4.1 versus, like it's 0.1 points difference. And if you look at masters, masters are actually the worst. So they are substantially lower, or 0.2 points lower than executive MBAs, and they are 0.1 points lower than undergraduates. So MBAs are not better, or do not keep their team members any different. And again, I mean, these are negligible differences, but somewhat not in the favor of the MBA students. And when you look at the quality of the final reports, again, more or less the same, 4.4 out of 7 for most, slightly better for EMBAs. So statistically speaking, we don't really see that MBA students perform better, put in more effort. I, by the way, looked at some other data, how much time they invest and stuff like that. About the same. So they are a little bit older, like a couple years or 3 years older. But other than that, I mean, I wouldn't say that they perform better. Now, again, I have always and will ever be trying to separate those categories, just so I don't have to deal with the complaints. But if your students happen to be on a mixed team, there is really no reason to worry that the younger undergraduates will not be up to the same standards as MBAs. They will invest the same effort, they will produce reports of similar quality, and so there will be really not much difference other than that label. And students need to blame problems on something, so they immediately blame it on one visible attribute, which is the level of studies.